a verse quoted out of context, Matthew 2:13-15. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I have called my son. And that's Matthew 2:13-15. Compared with Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. Okay, so we're going to have a look at Matthew 2:13-15 from the original hidden and preserved Galilean Aramaic, which Jesus and his disciples spoke and apparently wrote the text in of what they saw the Christ do and what he said, and passed it on to the high priest of the original church of the Apostolic Church of the East, founded by Thomas, in Edessa. Translated by native-born Aramaic-speaking translator Victor N. Alexander. We're going to have a look at Matthew 2:13-15. And what does it say? 2:13-15. Following their departure, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and told them, Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and stay there until I tell you, because Herod has prepared to search for the boy to destroy him. Joseph then rose, took the child and his mother by night and fled to Egypt, and they stayed there until the death of Herod, so that what the Lord had said through the prophet may be fulfilled, when he said, From Egypt I called out my son. Okay, so let's have a look at Hosea 11:1 in a Americanized Bible version in English. Okay. We'll use this NIV here to have a look at Hosea. First we've got to find it. So probably best to look at the index. When you're kids you remembered all these from memory, but when you're older you forget things, right? Hosea, page 636. 636. Way off. Okay, not even anywhere near it. Okay, Hosea 11:1. God's love for Israel. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. But the more I called Israel, the further they went from me. They sacrificed to the Baals, and they burned incense to images. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by the arms, but they did not realize, etc., etc. So, number one, in sum, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. So it's talking about the nation of Israel. Okay? That God loved, who called him out of Egypt, out of bondage. Okay? Exodus liberated them. He called his son, his nation, Israel. But the more he called Israel, the further they went from him. It's got the footnote down the bottom here, B2 of the NIV, Septuagint, Hebrew, them. So the more he called them, the more he called Israel, the further they went from. The more they went from him. Okay, so yeah, it's basically what he says there. Okay, so not faulting him on that one. And what does he say below that? A person who is really seeking to know the truth about God is not going to search the Bible hoping to find a text that he can construe as fitting what he already believes. He wants to know what the Tanakh itself says. Yet this is not the path that the writers of the New Testament followed. Instead, without exception, every verse missionaries use as a proof text to bolster their claim that Jesus is the Messiah is unsupported by the Jewish scriptures and quoted completely out of context. Well, that's exactly what it was there, right? For example, the author of the book of Matthew claims that the last phrase of Hosea 11:1, out of Egypt I have called my son, demonstrates that Jesus' childhood escape into Egypt was recklessly torn out of its original context. Read pages 322 to 329 for an extensive study of Matthew's nativity narrative. The children of Israel are specifically identified as God's son in Hosea 11:1, not Jesus, as Matthew would have us believe. Okay, so he's right there, as we said. Okay, Matthew does not fit Hosea 11:1, so tick to him. Okay, 1-0. Zechariah 13:1-6. In that day there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Israel. Right? The inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanliness. And it shall be in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, etc., etc. What are these wounds between your hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Who is that? Zechariah. Okay, it is on the right in the Hebrew. Okay, it's not talking about Jesus, is it? Okay, I am no prophet, I am a husbandman, for man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. So it doesn't look like it's talking about Christ. It's talking about the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanliness. In that day there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanliness. And that shall be in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered, and I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and mother that begot him, or gave birth to him, shall say unto him, Thou shalt not live, for thou speakest lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and his mother that begot him shall thrust him through when he prophesies. So we're going to kill him or whatever? Stab him to death or something? Or is it like a allegory where they cut deep with the truth? Yeah, cut deep with the truth. And it shall come to pass in that day that the prophets shall be ashamed every one of his vision when he hath prophesied, neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive, but he shall say, I am no prophet, I am a husbandman, for men taught me to keep cattle from my youth. Or man, and no one shall say unto him, what are these wounds, etc., etc. Okay, so what's this over here? Matthew 2:23. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, he shall be called a Nazarene. Contrary to Matthew's claim, there is no prophecy anywhere in the Jewish scriptures which suggests that the Messiah will reside at Nazareth. In fact, the city of Nazareth is never mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, but it's mentioned in the original ancient, very old Galilean Aramaic, translated by Victor N. Alexander in the Aramaic New Testament. And we can have a look at that and verify that it actually says that there. Let's have a look here. And yes, it is slightly different, very different. 2:23. And he came and lived in the town called Nazareth, so that what the prophets had said came to be fulfilled, that victorious he shall be called. Footnotes 2:23. In Aramaic pronounced Nusrat, meaning the victorious, or the town of the town of Nazareth, for he shall be victorious, right? And it's on page 11 of the Aramaic New Testament, translated by Victor N. Alexander, in regards to the Galilean Aramaic in English. And it's the original, very old Galilean Aramaic. We'll go back to it because we thought we saw something else. Okay, it's comparisons of the King James Version of Isaiah 38:13 with Hebrew Isaiah 38:13. Psalms 22:12-13, 13:14 King James Version. Psalms 22:21 of the King James Version. 22:20-21, 21-22. Psalm 17:11-12 King James Version. And it states here, King David is pleading with God for salvation from his relentless foes in these famed passages. Throughout the 22nd chapter, the psalmist characterizes fierce enemies as lions, dogs and bulls. This violent animal motive is a common theme in the verses both before and after Psalms 22:17. Psalms 17:11-12 and 35:17 are sister passages to 22:17, and Christian translators correctly render the Hebrew word lion in those parallel verses. The church deliberately mistranslated and lifted numerous verses in Psalm 22 and placed them in the mouth of Jesus. Accordingly, Christendom refers to Psalm 22 as the crucifixion psalm. See volumes 2, page 1731. So on this video where he talks about, he's asked a question and he talks about Psalm 22, 23, right? We actually covered that because he actually states, Rabbi Tovia Singer states, there's no prophetic message within that passage. There's no need for commentary. If you just read it as it is, you'll fully understand what it's all about. So we did that and we compared it with the Aramaic New Testament. The Psalms 22 in the Old Testament, from the original ancient, very old Lishon Atika Supriya of the Aramaic, the original ancient, very old Aramaic, or Tav Ashert, okay, which is a long dead language, which Victor N. Alexander found a method to revive that, to translate those old, that old sacred scribal tongue or language into the nearest English equivalent, and while staying faithful to what those scriptures actually say. Okay, so that's where Tovia Singer makes a claim, but we showed that it was false according to those original scriptures, scriptures, right? If they are indeed ancient, very old, the original ancient, very old scriptures, as Victor N. Alexander states on his downed website, va.com, which we resurrected, etc., etc. We believe that, if they are the original manuscripts, because we've done personal research about the Syrian Church of the East and their claims in regards to that Old Testament and the New Testament, and yes, we've done the personal research, so we have come to find that they've never been messed with, tampered with, never translated into other languages. They had no need to, so those are intact, given supposedly by the hands of Thomas to the high priest of that apostolic church, who then, the high priest then hid it and therefore preserved it for over 2,000 years. There's lots of testators or testimonies in place, verifications from the patriarchs of that church, especially Mar Isai Shamun, patriarch 1957, assassinated in 1975 by a Kurd or whoever, that testified that they'd never been tampered with. He being a testator, right, this testimony, if you're going to find testator, his testimony, last will and testament, is not valid until he's dead or martyred. Okay, that's the definition of it. Okay, so we're going to continue on. Hopefully this information is giving you insight. Matthew claims Jesus' virgin birth was foretold in the book of Isaiah. There is a good reason why the virgin birth of Jesus is not mentioned in any of the earliest writings of the New Testament. The notion that Jesus was miraculously conceived was a later Christian invention, according to Rabbi Tovia Singer. Paul, whose epistles are the oldest and most extensive writings in the Christian canon, did not believe that Jesus was born of a virgin. Accordingly, he never mentioned his birth. Just because he doesn't mention it doesn't mean it's not true, right? Moreover, Paul appears to express a negative view of developing virgin birth stories in their variant genealogies and considered them fanciful and harmful to faith. He urges his followers not to occupy themselves with myths and endless genealogies which promote speculation. 1 Timothy 1:4. The author of the book of Mark, the oldest and least embellished gospel, was also unaware of Jesus' virgin birth and begins by introducing us to Jesus as an adult at his baptism. Did Paul and Mark just forget to mention that Jesus was supernaturally conceived? Okay, so that's Matthew 1:20-23. Okay, we're going to have a look at that in the Aramaic New Testament, translated by Victor and Alexander. Okay, 1:23. See what it says. (1:23). And that is on page 9. 22. All this took place then so that everything the Lord had said through the prophet, that's Isaiah, may be fulfilled. Come to be. Okay. That, look, take note, the virgin, or be aware, the virgin will conceive and give birth to the son, or to a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means Allah is with us, or God is with us. Allah in the Aramaic. As Joseph rose from his sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took her as his bride. And he did not have intercourse with her until she gave birth to the male son, or the heir, and she called him Joshua, or Ishor. And footnote here says 1:16.2, literal Aramaic title, Mashiach, Messiah, common spelling in English, or Christ. 1:25.1, literal Aramaic idiom, or expression, the way they bring it across, put it across, ear, H-E-I-R. 1:25.2, note, pronounced Ishor, or Ishor. So the Y is like an E, well it doesn't say here double E, so it would probably be Isho, 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 Ishor. Okay, so that's what it says there. Okay, there's 23. Yeah, behold, the virgin, or the virgin. Behold, the virgin will conceive and give birth to the son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means Allah is with us, or God is with us. Because sin has separated man from God, and there was no way back. So the Christ becomes that bridge, the way back to the Father, as he says in Scripture, no man cometh unto the Father but through me, for he's the way, the truth, and life, right? There's no other way but to go through him. So he's the one mediator between man and God, the one way back, not the Pope. Okay, so don't believe that rubbish. Okay, of that false doctrine, dogma. Okay, so it's there in Matthew 1:20-23. Okay, well, they spell Emmanuel with an E. Well, the translator has put it E, Emmanuel. Okay, so here's Isaiah 7:14 in the original Hebrew text. So that would be the Ketav Asher, right? Or the, sorry, not the Ketav Asher, the Ketav Ivri, or even the Hotep that Moses learnt, supposedly from his grandparent or someone like that, while in Egypt before the liberation, the Exodus. So he would have spoken that, right? The Hotep maybe was that Egyptian that he learnt because he was part of the kingdom of Egypt, the house of Egypt, right? And he learnt all the, he was educated in the Egyptian way, so he would have learnt that, been taught that ancient Egyptian language, right? Which is probably the Ketav Hotep that they're referring to, possibly, because he's instructed in the all of that was Egyptian, so it would have included the language. The Gospel of Matthew mistranslated Isaiah 7:14. The book of Matthew, 80 to 85 CE, written about 15 years after the book of Mark, is one of two Gospels which claims that Jesus was miraculously conceived without a human father, through the power of the Holy Spirit. Right? To support this assertion, the first Gospel famously misquoted Isaiah 7:14 to read, okay, the first, that's talking about Mark, right? Matthew, sorry. Famously misquoted Isaiah 14 to read, "Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which means God is with us, or Allah is with us. 1:23. Matthew quite dramatically and very deliberately mistranslated the original Hebrew text of Isaiah 7:14. What compelled the author of the book of Matthew to change the original words of Isaiah? He sought to prove that Isaiah predicted that Jesus would be conceived miraculously and was therefore quite literally the Son of God. Furthermore, in an effort to ensure that Matthew 1:23 and Isaiah 7:14 appear consistent, numerous Christian Bibles purposely or deliberately mistranslated Isaiah 7:14 to comport with Matthew's mistranslation of this verse. For example, the word virgin appears nowhere in the original text of Isaiah 7:14. Matthew rendered the Hebrew word Ha'alma as a virgin in order to bolster his assertion that Jesus was miraculously conceived. This Hebrew word, however, means the young woman, conveying only age, gender, not sexual purity. The only word in both biblical and modern Hebrew that specifically and clearly encapsulates the idea of certain virginity is Betula. To be sure, the book of Proverbs employs the same words as Isaiah, this is Hebrew, to describe an adulterous wife, a woman who also clearly cannot be said to be a virgin. Okay, didn't the people of Joseph say, oh, how the heck did she get pregnant? So he tried to hide her, right? Protect her, because maybe their law was, okay, she's an adulteress, she has to be killed by stoning. Loving her that much, he hides her away, runs off with her. There are three things which are too wonderful for me, four which I do not understand: the way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a serpent on a rock, the way of a ship in the middle of the sea, and the way of a man with a young woman. But Alma, this is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wrong. Proverbs 30:18-20. Is that Solomon's sayings? In these passages, King Solomon compares a cheating wife's infidelity to other things that leave no trace behind: a bird flying in the air, the movement of a snake over a rock, navigation of a ship through the sea, and a man with an Alma. The sense conveyed in this text is that the promiscuous young woman having illicit sexual relations leaves no trace of her fornication, just as a bird leaves no trace in the air through which it passed. A snake leaves no trace on rocks it crosses, and a ship leaves no trace after crossing the sea. Clearly the Hebrew word does not mean a virgin. Furthermore, in an effort to ensure that Matthew 1:23 and Isaiah 7:14 appear consistent, numerous Christian Bibles purposely mistranslated Isaiah 7:14 to comport with Matthew's mistranslation of this verse. For example, the word virgin appears nowhere in the original text of Isaiah 7:14. So if it's the original text, would it not be the sister language of the original ancient sacred scribal tongue or language, the ancient Aramaic, or the Lishana Atika of the ancient Aramaic, which is from the Tav Eshet, being the sister language, the Hebrew, or Tav Ivri or Avri. At one point they had the same words, same meanings, but when the system was later added, modernized, etc., by the Masoretes, the words were similar but had different meanings. So that was the separation that came between the Aramaic and the Hebrew. Right? This Hebrew word, however, means a young woman. Okay, they're saying that it's put as a virgin in order to bolster Matthew's assertion that Jesus was miraculously conceived. This Hebrew word, however, means a young woman. conveying only age, gender, not sexual purity. The only word in both biblical and modern Hebrew that specifically and clearly encapsulates the idea of a certain virginity, or how do you put it? Encapsulates, verifies basically, right? It makes it clear the idea of certain virginity, that this woman was an actual virgin, is Betula. To be sure that the book of Proverbs employs the same word as Isaiah to describe an adulterous wife, a woman who also clearly cannot be said to be a virgin. There are three things which are too wonderful for me, four which I do not understand: the way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a serpent on a rock, the way of a ship in the middle of the sea, and the way of man with a young woman. But Alma, this is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wrong. Proverbs 30:18-20. In these passages, King Solomon compares a cheating wife's infidelity to other things that leave no trace behind: a bird flying in the air, the movement of a snake over a rock. Okay. Navigation of a ship through the sea, and a man with an Alma. The sense conveyed in this text is that a promiscuous young woman having illicit sexual relations leaves no trace of her fornication, just as a bird leaves no trace in the air, though which it passed. A snake leaves no trace on rocks it crosses, and a ship leaves no trace after crossing the sea. Clearly the Hebrew word does not mean a virgin in that sense, right? Unless she's proven to be a virgin. Yeah. It's referring to a cheating wife, etc. The Septuagint therefore mistranslated Proverbs 30:19 as the way of a man in his youth, which bears no resemblance to the original text. Yeah, well, that's Alexandrian Greek, wasn't it? Yeah. It's not that Jewish Septuagint. Why did the Septuagint employ such a bizarre translation of Proverbs 30:19? The answer is simple. Christian editors of the Septuagint did not want its readers to grasp that the Hebrew word is unrelated to virginity or chastity. We will later explore the origin of the Septuagint and examine the methods Christian redactors employed to revise this Greek translation of Tanakh. Okay, they've translated the original Jewish Septuagint using the Greek, created a Greek Septuagint, and totally botched everything. What motivated church editors to alter passages in the Greek Septuagint? It's the Greek version of that of the Jewish Septuagint. The answer to this question is simple as well. They had to ensure that their tailor-made version of the Septuagint, which eventually became everyone's version, harmonized perfectly with the New Testament. Okay, see, does Alma mean a virgin? Volume 2, page 33. Moreover, the Hebrew noun Elim, which means young man, is the masculine form of the word Alma and appears twice in the Old Jewish scriptures. Without exception, all Christian Bibles correctly translate as young man, lad, or stripling, never a virgin. This raises an important question. Why did the King James Version of the Bible accurately translate the masculine Hebrew noun, la Elim, as to the young man in 1 Samuel 20:22, and yet in Isaiah 7:14 it translated the feminine form of the exact same Hebrew noun as virgin, as a virgin? Why don't Christian Bibles translate in 1 Samuel 20:22 as to the virgin? What would prompt the world's most esteemed English translation of the Bible to render the identical word so differently in two different books in the Bible? The answer is obvious. Christian Bibles had no need to mistranslate 1 Samuel 20:22 because this verse was not misquoted in the New Testament to support its creeds. Matthew 1:23, on the other hand, poses an existential problem for Christendom. If the word does not mean a virgin, Matthew deliberately misquoted the prophet Isaiah, and both a key tenet of Christianity and the credibility of the first gospel would be shattered. The veracity of the church rests entirely on the legitimacy of the Christian Bible. So here's two verses here: 1 Samuel 17:56 in the King James Version, and the king said, "Inquire thou whose son the stripling is." 1 Samuel 20:22 KJV, But if I say thus unto the young man, the above verses are the only passages where the masculine form of the Hebrew word appear in the Tanakh. Predictably, the King James Version, the most esteemed English translation of the Bible, correctly translated this word indicating age, gender, not virginity. If the word can only mean virgin, as missionaries insist, why isn't there a single Christian Bible in the world in any language that translates this word as virgin in the above 2 verses? Look it up yourself. Is it Alma and Elim? I think it's talking about right. Okay, so we have an idea here that could possibly solve that problem, that question, that all of these translations of the Hebrew to the Greek, they're translated into the Old German, and then the Latin, the Old English, or Shakespeare speak. It was all translated by Roman Catholic scribes, monks, translators like Martin Luther, Tyndale, Wycliffe, etc. And they corrupted it all, because as we always mention about this Brian video, this guy with the beard and glasses, he explains that in the left column it's all Roman Catholic. Okay, it's all stems from the Roman Catholic Church and the scribes, monks like Luther, etc. Where's the KJV? Where's the other one he's talking about? The what's it called? Oh Jesus, it's in Latin. Sinaitic, I think you might be talking about, or something else, right? There's two that are missing, but he says watch out for the Nestle Land or whatever it's called version, okay, where it's corrupt and all that sort of stuff. And then he shows you that it comes, all these Bible versions, these Americanized Bible versions, come through the American Bible Society, and he shows you a pamphlet full of all of their lies. Okay, and people say, "Oh, poo, that guy's been poo-pooed," whatever. But he's done the research. He has the evidence there. You know, where's the on the right-hand side? Where's the King James? Well, they didn't mess with that. Where's the sure it wasn't Latin Vulgate. It was like that Greek. When it was the Hebrew was translated into Greek. Where's that, and so forth, right? According to that video. So that could be the problem there. That this Roman Catholic Church, or in order to be the number one, the mother church, they established, the mother church, wipe everybody else out. They'll put out these false doctrines and dogmas, right? And they'll put out these Americanized English Bible versions, to everybody in the world, and they're all preaching and teaching from those, not realizing that they're corrupt, got contradictions, take things out of context, etc., etc., or they don't want these people that are using it think it's the truth, right? That's the infallible word of God, etc., etc. So when you expose them, they get all nasty, right? And say, no, you're from the devil, you're Satan, all that sort of stuff, right? Because it's basic it's a neuro problem, cognitive problem, right? And because you've touched on something that they truly believe, or they hold so dear, they believe that it's true, right? It's the infallible word of God, etc., etc. That's why they get upset. Yeah, you've hit a raw nerve. How do we know this? Because we asked a person who was doing a master's, so he was doing a degree to get their master's and then get their PhD in neuropsychology or cognitive therapy or something like that, right? They verified it because we had this funny feeling for years going to church and all that sort of stuff that there's something completely wrong with this Christianity and these people pushing it, right? Why do they get so snappy and nasty when you say, well, that defies logic and common sense, or whatever it says in the black and white in the various versions of the Bible, right? Doesn't make sense. What you're saying that's in the black and white isn't reading that way, right? It's not that in the English. Do you have a problem reading? What's your we've been told by someone else who's supposed to be a university lecturer in the US, an Australian woman, that the US level of education is like the understanding, etc., is like level 5, grade 5, something like that. It's really low compared to other countries, all this sort of stuff. And she, yes, they say that's the actual fact. Okay, what takes them 5 years to learn, or 7 to 9 years to learn, other countries like New Zealand, Australia, whatever, have the highest level of education or recognised, etc. It takes them like 2 to 4 years to understand and achieve, right? Certificate wise, diploma wise, BA, whatever, right? Why does it take them so long? But that's the education level, it's like a grade 5, okay, compared to everybody else. Okay, so yeah, that's an explanation of what probably went down over the centuries. Okay.